Welcome back. Welcome to another live Q&A session of 115. Today we're going to be talking about this music rating app. So this is an application that is used for allowing us to create a system where we can get together and rate music and post links. So if you want, you can actually see and actually participate in this app. Anybody can join in, right? It is a web app, so anybody with a web application, if you look, the URL is https://lecture30-profmatthewhz.repl.co. That's what brings up this page, and you can see I've started a little bit with it. And so what we have here is a system where we can add different YouTube links if we want. We have to give it the YouTube ID. So if we look, what we can do is give it a YouTube ID, for instance, as I'm quickly looking up a video. So for instance, for the current video, I realize this does not count as music, but if you look, the ID for today's video is this, title, live Q&A, artist, I only need one name, and we could submit it and it will add to our list of songs, and now we can also rate them. So this is sort of the beginning of this, but before I go into anything else, does anybody have any questions about this? Otherwise, I can go over some of this code, but just want to check for any questions. Okay, don't see any questions coming in. So what we have here is we have the sort of the main Ajax aspect of our web server. So I've got 3 different functions to respond to some of the information. So I actually called it get chat. You can tell I used this from before. I'm going to actually call it get songs just to make it more clear. So we've got this one route at bottle.route. So when we send a get request, remember at bottle.route is for get requests. When we send a get request for /songs, we end up in this function. And this is just going to call over into our ratings.py. So again, I split my code into 2. I have the main.py, that's what we're looking at now, that handles all of the web server work. And then ratings.py, that is the other file where I do actually all of the work to add a song, look up a song, add a rating, look up ratings. So this is going to call ratings.getSongs and add that to a song list. Of course, that's a Python list that wouldn't be usable by me, by any of you, by any clients. So what I'm also going to do is then turn that list into a JSON string, a JSON blob, by calling json.dumps on it and returning that result. And now one thing you might notice is that I actually have those lines 21 and 22, 23, not only in /songs, but when we add a song, what we're going to do is respond with the full set of data. And when we rate a song, we're going to do that. And that's yucky. It's not bad, but if it means if I ever make any changes or whatever, I have to make it in all 3 places, remember it in all 3 places. It's not really good style. It's not a good idea. So I've created a function up here at the top, JSON song data, which actually does that work. So I can put it in one place. And now what I'm going to do, because it makes more sense, is just replace that code everywhere. And that way, if I ever need to change it, I can pretty easily. So I'm just going to copy and paste that, replace it here and here. And the reason I wanted to do this is like I said, this is much better style. We can now I only have to change code in one place. That makes life a lot easier. But also, part of why I was showing this to you guys right now is I wanted to point out, as we're writing this web server work and doing all this web server work, we're just writing Python code. And yes, there is this bottle server. There are these weird annotations we're adding. But at the end of the day, it is just simply Python code. And so we can do anything that we want that we can normally do in Python code. We can include loops. We can include selection statements. We can call functions in the same module, in a different module, whatever we want. So that is one of the benefits of this bottle library. So for getting a song, we're just going to get that song data, turn it into a JSON blob, return it. To add a song, now remember when we're adding a song or adding a rating, right, that's going to be something that the client has to send to the server. And again, one of the really important things to keep in mind, I'm still getting some questions about this actually in Piazza, mostly in Piazza, is understanding how this Ajax stuff works. The big thing to remember is whenever we're working with Ajax, we're going to have two different or more than two different computers. There's all of the Python code that is being run by Replit servers. Replit server, or whatever your web server is, that's going to run the Python code. The only way that those servers interact with the HTML file or the JavaScript code is frankly just to send it to the client. Everything that's the HTML is rendered entirely by any client that's out there. So this could be my computer. This could be other computers. And in fact, not only that, but all of the JavaScript will be run by my computer, any of your computers. So two completely separate things. At no point does the JavaScript ever call the Python code or vice versa. Instead, what happens is the JavaScript will say, send this request, send this post. The browser, my computer, will send that to the server. The server will receive it. And what it's going to do for a post is it looks for this @bottle.post annotation. Remember, we need the post annotation to work for a post request. And we will do /add song. So if it comes in for add song, a post request, then the first thing we need to do is find out the song that we're adding. So we have to use this line bottle.request.body. Call the read function .decode. Really long, complex thing, I realize, but call that function. When we call that function, that'll return the JSON blob that we provided in that post request. So we then need to make it usable in Python. So we'll call json.loads. Remember, that's what converts a JSON blob into usable Python data. And then we'll call that ratings.addSong. And I'll show that to you in a little bit. And once we're done with that, we'll reload the song data. And for rate song, we're going to do something very similar. The data probably will change, but you'll note that it doesn't really make much of a difference which one of these we're using. The process is still the same. And so if I wanted to, I could actually be a little bit fancier and even combine them a little bit, but it's not really that important since the only place they differ is whether they call add song or rate song. So what I also want to show you is a little bit of how I organize this. And the reason I organized it this way is just to make my life easier. So you can see on this main location, I've got main and ratings. I've got my two Python files. I've got two folders in my REPL. One is client, and this is where all of the JavaScript and HTML live. A second folder is data files, and that's where all my data lives. Again, I don't need to do this, but when you get into a real application, into real world stuff, the more organized you can have everything, the easier it is to use. So that's what I'm doing here. So as far as the client work goes, the stuff that we're going to send, so there's the HTML file, and that isn't all that different from before. I've got a title of the page. I've got the script tags to load in my scripts. So I've got ajax.js again, and that's just a file I created to have that Ajax get request and Ajax post request function. Since I just copy and pasted, it makes it easier just to have that as a file each time. And then I've got ratings.js. That's where all of the code is right now. And I'm going to change it up a little bit, but I just wanted to show that to you. And then here, after that, that ends the head region. Remember, every HTML file can have at most one head region and one body region, and the body always has to come below the head. It's weird to have your body above your head. For the body, I'm using this onload property. Remember, that's a property that we can use, and what it will do is it will execute whatever its value is. It'll execute that as JavaScript when the page is loaded. And so what I've said here is to call that a function getSongs. As you can imagine, it's going to get all the song data from the server. And then every 5,000 milliseconds, every 5 seconds, it should refresh that song list. And after that, I've just got a section for add song, this top section right here, boxes for YouTube ID, title, artist, and a submit button. And everything down here, all of this music data, you can see is just a div ID equals songs. It's just there so that we can update it, right? It has that ID songs, so we'll be able to update it. So we can now look at the ratings.js file, right? This is our JavaScript file. And so you can see that the first thing it does, and every 5 seconds, what it's going to do is call this getSongs function. And the getSongs function is very simple. It's just going to call Ajax GetRequest. It's just going to say, make a request, say send a request to the server for data. The request should go to the path/songs. And we always need to include that callback function that will be executed whenever we get a response back. We don't know exactly when that is, and that is display songs. So that's saying, remember that the way this works, at some point we'll get a response back. We never need to call display songs. JavaScript's going to take care of that for us because there might be a short pause. There might be a longer pause between when we make our request and when it comes back. So in display songs, this is going to be the response, the callback that gets used. So we know the server is going to have sent a message. The only way it's going to get called, JavaScript will use it when a message was sent. So the first thing we have to do is turn that message from the JSON blob that gets sent by the server into usable JavaScript data. Then I'm just going to collect something for the HTML that we're going to be getting together. And then what I'm going to say is for each song ID in songs, I'm going to, so remember the for in loop here, right? So that's going to go through the indices. It's going to go through the keys of this, the indices of this. I'll get that song, and then I will generate the song HTML. Now, this brings up an interesting issue. I actually have two different sets of functions here. So I've got some functions which are involved in that Ajax coding. So not the Ajax functions themselves, but that send a request, like getSongs, or respond to a request, like displaySongs. I also have some code, and it's important, but not the same, right? So if you see every song that we have here, I've got, we've got the name of the song, the title, the artist. If you look, there's a link to the YouTube page there. I've got a list of the ratings and buttons here that I can select to add a rating. So I can say that. Old Town Road, sure. It's a 4. So I need to have I need to have code to generate all of that HTML. And you can see I've actually split it out. So I have generate song HTML. This is going to work for every song. You can see here, if you know this is going to create the reference, the link. Inside that, we'll have the title and artist. Then we're going to have all of the ratings. And then what I've done here is I've created a function, generate rating buttons, right? I need those 5 buttons all over the place. And if you think about it, the way that this is written, we actually have the same code for each button. We just need it 5 times for each of the different 5 ratings. So I've just put that into a function. And this function, because I need to go through it 5 times, I've cheated to do this. If you look, I just create an array that has the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I can use my for of loop to work with that. But so all of this code, this isn't really the same sort of thing. It's important. They're important functions, right? We need to keep track of it, but it's not really an HTML class here. So what I'm going to do is actually remove this from this file and add it to this other file I have here, HTML_gen. And so now, even though it's in a separate JavaScript file, because we loaded all 3 libraries in that header region, I'm going to be able to still use those functions. I don't have to worry about it. This will still work. So that's the work to display a song. When we click on an add song function, you can see that I'm going to call this function new song. And what that's going to do is get the song ID element. And we're going to use, to do that, we have to call document.getElementById. And then again, I have another function here, getValueInClear. Now that's going to take in that input object. So whatever object we get is going to be returned by getElementById. Now all 3 things that we're going to be working with here, the input, the ID, the title, and the artist, are text boxes. They are input elements. So I know I need to use that value key with it. So I can get its value, assign its value to the empty string just so I can see that something happened. That's the feedback as a user we tend to like. And then I'll just return whatever result I had beforehand. And again, I'm actually going to move this into my HTML sort of code because it's not really part of the main idea. It's just there to make my code prettier and easier to read, right? I can just see, what am I doing each time? Oh, I'm getting the value and clearing that element. So we get all 3 elements. I then create an object that has 3 keys, song ID, title, and artist, turn that into a JSON blob, and send my post request. And again, the way that we call post request, we say, here is the route, here's the path on the server to send it to. For a post request, we have to say, here is the data, here is typically a JSON blob that I want to send to the server. And then because every time we call either AJAX GET request or AJAX POST request, it always starts on the client side. And then eventually the server will respond when it gets to it and can handle it. So we need to have something to handle that response from the server. Again, we never need to call this function. JavaScript is going to take care of that for us. But we need to say, here is the function to handle that response, display songs. And I also have this function called rate, which is going to do the same sort of idea, but it's going to call post request to rate a song. So I'm going to restart my server just so you can see that this still works. And so now if I reload the page, you can see it's all still there. We still have everything. I've just now added that other HTML_gen file. So one neat thing, right? I created this HTML_gen. I was able to make it work. One thing you'll notice is I did not change anything in my server to make that work. And to see why, I just want to show you the code I have here for my for the web server itself. So the web server, even though I have to serve up both the JavaScript and HTML file, I sort of cheated. So for that HTML file, for that route slash, we always need to cover that. I just have it reading in index.html. But note here, rather than having the root being the dot, I have the root as client. So when we use this root, this is telling the Bottle library which folder to look in. And so since I try to keep everything organized, I put all of my client-facing files in this client folder. What I'm telling it to do is read in index.html. But rather than looking in the current folder, that's what it means when we put a dot, I said, look in the client folder. So this just allows me, again, to keep everything a little bit more organized, a little bit easier to work with. For the JavaScript files, I'm cheating. If you look, I'm using this little bit in the route, rather than just listing the route, I have that greater than, less than sign. I have a little bit of a tag for JS file. Now this is going to match any request for any file that ends in .js. So anytime someone requests a .js file, what's going to happen is it's going to come into this function, and this variable, this parameter JS file, will be assigned whatever file they requested. And so what I can do is call, again, bottle.staticFile. And just to show you how this works, we'll do this. We can print out that result. Restart this just so you can see it. You can see that there was a request for ratings. When there was a request for ratings, it immediately went into here. JS file was assigned ratings. And so what we get is ratings.js from the client. So I can actually add as many JavaScript functions or as many JavaScript files as I want, and I don't have to update my web server, which is kind of nice. The other thing you'll note is when we look at the files that are here, if we look at the requests on the network, there's lots of song requests. If I reload this so I can see it at the very top, you'll note that it's just thinking that all of these files, Ajax, HTML.gen, ratings.js, all those JavaScript files are in the main folder. It doesn't realize that they're in the client folder. And that's because it doesn't matter, right? All that it's using whenever our clients request a path, all that it's going to do is send in that route. We can actually redirect those as much as we want or move them around as much as we want in order to make our lives easier, in order to make the code simpler, the structure prettier, whatever we want to do. So any questions with that basic stuff so far? So that's sort of all the Ajax. The last thing that I want to talk about is the actual music rating system and how I'm storing that data. But before I get there, any questions about this so far? Okay, don't see any questions coming in. So what I'm going to do is jump to this ratings.py file. This is where all this stuff comes in. And now you can see again, to make life simpler, there are a lot of files here. I put all of my data files in this data files folder. You'll note we're using CSV files here because we need some structure, right? We're not just storing a message anymore, but we're actually storing, every song has a song ID, a title, and an artist. For ratings, we're going to have what song that we're rating and what that rating is. So there's some structure there to our data. So I've created two separate files. A songs file, that's going to be the CSV file that has all of that information. So here's the ID, the name of the song, the artist, separated by commas because that's how CSV files work. And in addition to that, I've got a ratings.csv, which is just going to have all my ratings data because that has a different number of columns. So for get songs, what we're going to do, we're going to create a dictionary named songs, initially empty. We are going to open up that file, create our CSV reader so we can read it in row by row. And for each row, what we'll do, we'll just read in the song ID, the title, the artist, and add that to our dictionary. So the key will be the song ID. Every song has a unique ID. And the information will be there. And for ratings, we'll just initially leave it as an empty array. Now, one benefit of doing things this way is we don't want to add songs multiple times, right? We don't want to have multiple listings for this same song. We'd like it all to be together. By using a dictionary and by making the key that song ID, we can only ever have a video appear once. So that's a nice little benefit. Then once we've read in all of that song and all those songs, what we're going to do is go through, open up our ratings file name, create the CSV reader, go through each row, read in the song ID, that string, and then we're going to read in the rating. But remember that a CSV file is a type of text file. So normally that rating would be a string. Anything that we read in from a CSV file is a string. Since we know it's actually a number, I have this call to the int function to make it into a number. And then what we're going to do, check to make sure that we know that song was one that's in our song dictionary. And if it is, we'll append its ratings array with the current rating. So hopefully that's not too bad. And again, if you have questions, feel free to ask. For add song, you can see it's a little bit more complicated. What we're going to do every time we want to add a song, we want to see if it's in our song dictionary first. So I'm going to call get songs. And the reason I'm going to do this is I want to make sure that this is a brand new song and that we got valid data. Remember, anybody can send a message, send a GET request to our server. Anyone can send it to that /add song URL, that route. So one thing I want to do is make sure I have a properly formed song before I start to use it. I want to make sure I don't crash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that song ID is a key in the song that we got passed in, that the song that we got passed in has title as a key, and then it has artist as a key. I want to make sure it has those 3 pieces of data that I'm expecting. If it has those 3 pieces of data, then what I want to do is make sure that it has data that I'd actually want to add to my system. So as it turns out, every video in YouTube has that ID, and all of them have an ID with a length of 11. That's YouTube has just hit on 11 characters for each video's ID. So I make sure that the video ID has a length of 11. If it doesn't, I'll reject it. I'll make sure that we don't, whatever that song ID is, that it's not already in our song dictionary. So if we've already added that song, if I try to add a song again, I want to reject it, and that will make sure I can reject it. And then finally, what I want to make sure of is that the title and the artist are not equal to the empty string. I want to make sure that they actually provided a title and artist. And whenever I add something, you can see right now I'm just printing it out just so you can see it. If all of that is true, so we know we have a good song, then what I'm going to do is open up the song's file name, and note I'm using an A here, right? I'm going to append that file. I'm going to add to the end of it. And what am I going to do? I'm going to create my CSV writer, and I'm going to now, in order to call the CSV writer, I'm going to have to use write row. I'm going to have to write a row out. So I'm going to write out a row. This is going to be a list, has to be a list. So I'll create the song ID, title, artist, our 3 fields, make that into a list, and write that out. Now you'll note here at the very end, I have this return none. The reason I have this isn't strictly necessary, but what happens is that there's some work that goes on behind the scenes whenever you're working with a file. That with as does a bunch of work for us. We tell it to open the file, but just like there's a command to open a file, there's also a command to close the file. And the with as takes care of it. It will automatically close the file when that code suite ends. But if we have that at the end of our function, it doesn't always close cleanly. 90% of the time, this isn't a problem. Where this can be a problem is if you have a very long-running application, such as a web server that we just hit this restart button for. So for this specific case, it helps to make sure it gets closed. So the way I can make sure it gets closed is just having a statement to end the code suite. So after that code suite is over, note that this is outside of the with open. So for rate song, I'm going to go through a similar process. I get the songs. I make sure that our song rating is formed correctly, that it has both a song ID key, the rating key. I make sure that we do know of this song previously, and that the rating is one of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You know, I could have written this a lot of different ways. I could have said, rather than it's in this list, which is what I'm doing right now, I could have said it's got to be, equal to 1 or equal to 2 or equivalent to 3 or equivalent to 4. I could have said its value has to be between 1 and 5 inclusive. Lots of different ways to do it. This was the way that seemed easiest to me. When the numbers are just 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, it's pretty easy just to add it, just to write a literal list, right? This is called a list literal because it's a list. All the values are explicitly included, and seeing if it's in there. And if it's valid, then I open up the ratings file name, create my writer, create the list of data I want to write, which is the ID and the rating, and write out the row. And again, just to make sure that everything gets saved, I return none after the with open is done. So that is actually all of the code that we need. If you can see that there's all sorts of different songs there. Suppose now I wanted to add another video. You can't tell, I'm going in a different window real quick, and I am looking at I'm going to look at the most popular video right now. 21 Pilots has a new song. My daughter will be happy. This is just the top song. No, I do not want you to play. I don't care. But I can see I just wanted to get its ID, frankly. So this is the ID. The title is Level of Concern. And so far, I've always just been typing text. And you'll note that what we do is we just save whatever gets written, and then we retrieve whatever gets written. As a sort of way of motivating what's coming up, what you're going to be seeing, this is actually the last day of module 3. Starting on Wednesday, we'll be starting module 4. I just want to show you what would happen if we include, and I happen to know a little bit of HTML, so oh, excuse me. Apparently their name is supposed to be all lowercase. I'm looking at my title. So I'm going to add a little bit of HTML in here. See what happens. So I can submit it. And you can see not only does it go through, but of course, when we get that result, so if we look at that result that was just added, grab this. So I'm just going into the network. You can actually see everything. So you can see what gets sent. If we look at the response, you can see that it is this object. It's got a bunch of different data in it. So we've got Sesame Street, we've got Moana, we've got this video, and then we've got, finally, the last thing. Note that the artist actually includes all of that HTML I typed in. Now, when we add this to our code, when we actually are doing our HTML generation, you can see that I just use whatever value for the song title we have. And not only do I use whatever value we have, but we're going to set that as the HTML in our page. And so what that means is that right now, anyone can not only add a video, but they can add any sort of HTML that they want to this page. Now, right now, what have I done? I've made this thing for 21 Pilots, and I've made it italicized in red, which is not a particularly big deal, probably, certainly. But you can imagine this can be a problem, and we'll actually talk about some of these problems in Module 4. So I just want to motivate this a little bit, show you one of the things that could happen, the way that we're currently working with our data, where we just store it and retrieve it without any sort of thought. So this is the end of, this is all I have to present for this ratings music rating app. We are going to be using this a number of times just to try to see different ways that we can improve it. So one thing that we want to do is make sure that we're secure, safe. Right now we're using CSV files. We'll talk about different ways we could store data that is, going to be a little bit better, a little bit faster. certainly more powerful should this application go viral. But so you will be seeing this again. But with that, does anybody have any last questions right now before we end for the day and for the week? Just check. Okay. Don't see anybody having any questions. So thank you all very much. Have a good weekend. If you have not yet watched the announcement video, the important announcements video from today's lecture, that is day 30's lecture, day 30's lecture. Hard to remember. One thing to note, originally on the calendar on Monday, we were going to be handing back all the midterms. So the original schedule had us handing back the midterms on Monday. Obviously, we don't have any midterms to hand back. We didn't do the midterms. And so rather than trying to add more content and trying to just make your lives more difficult, I figure you all probably have enough going on in your lives. You still have UB Infinite. Next week is a lab exam week. The project is ongoing. You have your other classes. We're all trying to do this at a distance online. I would try to make things easier, give you a day off to catch up, to reflect, to think through things. So next Monday, there will not be any lecture videos posted. I will post an announcement slide just to make sure everybody's on the same page for announcements, but that's it. There won't be a top hat question on Monday. Instead, you'll have till Wednesday to answer day 30's top hat question. Same thing for the attendance question. There won't be a live Q&A on Monday because there is no new material, but I will try to be around on Piazza and other places. If you have questions, please feel free to drop me a line and I'll do what I can to help out. So thank you all very much. Have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you all next week. Thank you very much.